now learning that global coronavirus cases top 2 million around the world, and that is according to the latest data from Johns Hopkins University. Well, any other year, today would be tax day in America, and this year things are a little different, of course. The federal tax deadline has been pushed to July 15th, and joining me now to discuss is Mattie Duppler. She's a senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and president of Forward Strategies. Mattie, it's great to have you with me. What does this mean for Americans that they have an additional 3 months now to file their taxes?
Well, in short, it means that you've got 3 months to get the workload together to file your taxes. Of course, with the coronavirus pandemic going on, people have a lot of other things on their minds. So that's certainly a nice reprieve for those who have not yet been able to file. But secondly, it could potentially mean more cash in your pocket. If you're someone who believes you will owe, or if you're a business owner who's required to make quarterly payments, both of those instances have been delayed to July 15th. So particularly for those business owners who are trying to manage cash flow at a time when they have potentially had to lay off their workers or close their doors, this will be extremely useful for them as we move closer into July and we continue to look at the effect of the virus on business. So delaying that tax deadline, I think, was step number one the administration could take, not only to give Americans certainty, but also to create a little more liquidity and a little bit of a buffer for financial situations. And I was certainly happy to see the administration take those steps last month.
Okay, so Mattie, but what about people who actually think they're going to be refunded a bit by the federal government when they file their taxes? Are they still expecting a speedy refund, even if they file today or if they've already filed?
Right. There should not be any delay on getting your refund. And listen, if you think you are owed a refund from the federal government, file those taxes right away. That is an interest-free loan you've been giving the government for a year. You certainly deserve to have that money in your pocket. So you certainly should be encouraged to do so. But typically, filers who are owed a refund do tend to file up front. So by March 6th, when the IRS had contemplated delaying the tax deadline, you already had 60 million returns that had been processed, and about 80% of those included refunds for filers. So a lot of people who are owed refunds have already filed their taxes. But if you are one of those people, go ahead and get that paperwork in. You don't have to wait until July.
Okay, so how much money do we anticipate is going to be on hold, essentially, from people not having to file their taxes until July 15th? What is the government looking at in terms of deferred revenue?
Well, it's hard to know. Income taxes are an extremely volatile source of revenue because of instances that we're seeing right now. When the economy slows, you have fewer outlets for revenue. So about 50% of federal revenues are due to individual income taxes. So that certainly is a hefty amount of revenue that the federal government will be deferring for the remainder of the year. But interest rates are still low. We still expect the government to have deficit financing for a lot of the spending programs that are going into place. Another thing to keep in mind is that both individual and corporate taxes have been delayed. And about 9% of federal revenues are corporate taxes. So certainly the federal government will need to keep tabs on the money that's coming in the door, but things like Social Security and other entitlements are typically paid from trust funds, which do have a reserve in place to keep those checks going out the door. People don't have to be worried about not receiving Social Security checks in the near term.
Okay, so for people who have not yet filed, Mattie, what's your best advice to them in this process?
Well, one, I always recommend to filers to be giving as little money as possible to the federal government throughout the course of the year. That means checking your withholding with your HR department. And if you're at home working from home, maybe you have some extra time to do that, to shoot an email to your HR department to make sure that your withholding is correct. If you've experienced a life event like having a child, that's something you want to update with HR. So you don't want to have a shock at the end of the year either. So make sure your withholding reflects your current circumstances so you're paying as little as you can into the system, because you're going to be able to invest and use that money more wisely than the government is, because they're just sitting on it waiting for you to file for that return in April 15th. So remember, as we move through these next couple of weeks and months, and there's a lot of uncertainty, look at what your own liabilities are. If you're someone who has been furloughed or who is concerned for their employment picture because of coronavirus, there's a lot of forbearance offers out there with credit card companies, auto companies, and even renters. So make sure you're making those calls to those companies for which you might have obligations and asking if they have any precautions in place in order to preserve any cash you might have on hand as we move through the next couple of months.
All right, Mattie, thank you for the advice. It's good to see you. That's Mattie Duppler,
Good to see you too.
Senior Fellow at the National Tax